The moon hung low and bruised over Blackwood Sanitarium, a concrete tumor half swallowed by the pines since the state padlocked its doors in 1957. Everyone online knew the stories: electroshock wings that ran day and night, basement hydrotherapy tanks where patients were left until their skin sloughed off like wet paper, and the treatment theater where doctors once filmed their failures for research purposes. The building had been dark for nearly 70 years, yet on certain nights people living 10 miles away still swore they heard faint screaming carried on the wind, perfectly synchronized with the flicker of their television screens. The night of November 19, 2025, carried a sky so clear it felt surgical. High above the abandoned ridge where Blackwood Sanitarium crouched, the moon slid into a total lunar occultation behind the Earth's shadow, an event that turned the moon the color of dried blood and would not repeat for another 33 years. Astronomers called it a selennial eclipse with occultation of Regulus. The old patient logs at Blackwood had simply marked similar dates in red ink and written beside them, "Doors open both ways." By 11:07 p.m., 4 vehicles, 2 matte black vans and a pair of modified jeeps, pulled into the sanitarium's crumbled parking lot, tires crunching over decades of broken glass and pine needles. Luna Voss, the group's unofficial leader, stepped out first, breath fogging in the unnatural cold that always pooled here even in summer. 29, pale, with a streak of silver dye in her black hair that caught the ring lights like a blade, she had broken into 43 condemned sites without ever being caught. Tonight she carried a Pelican case full of 360-degree cameras and a custom streaming rig powerful enough to punch through the building's rumored signal-deadening concrete. Vic Ramirez followed, hauling a drone the size of a dinner plate fitted with thermal and full-spectrum lenses. Mara Olson, the researcher who could recite every documented death inside Blackwood from memory, clutched a leather satchel of microfiche printouts and a Geiger counter that had begun clicking the moment they crested the ridge. Last came Bishop. No one used his real name, silent behind wraparound headphones, already syncing wireless mics and checking latency on the satellite uplink they'd rented for $20,000. Their channel, Afterimage, had scheduled the stream for exactly midnight Eastern, 24 continuous hours inside the most forbidden asylum in North America. They weren't amateurs. They had permits, forged, contingency plans, and a private security contact who would call state police if the feed dropped for more than 15 minutes. They had bolt cutters for the outer chains, a hydraulic spreader for the inner doors, and enough battery packs to keep broadcasting through an apocalypse. What they didn't have, what no one ever has when they step into Blackwood, was any idea that the building had been waiting for a night precisely like this, when the moon bled and the sky aligned so that every lens on Earth pointed toward the same invisible wound between frequencies. As Luna powered up the main camera and the red tally lights blinked awake, the chat counter on her phone spiked past 50,000 pre-watchers. She smiled the smile that paid their rent, raised a gloved hand, and spoke the words that would seal the night forever. "Chat, we're about to make history." The lobby doors groaned shut behind them at 12:03 a.m. exactly, the sound of old iron teeth meshing together with a finality that made Bishop's headphones pop from sudden pressure change. Luna spun, GoPro capturing her startled laugh that wasn't quite a laugh. The chains they had cut less than 2 minutes earlier lay on the terrazzo floor inside now, still warm from their hands, links fused as though welded by something that had watched them snip the padlock and simply closed the circuit again. Vic was already at the main entrance, shoulder slamming into the steel fire door that should have opened outward. It didn't budge. No flex, no echo of impact traveling through the frame. The blow died against the metal like it had hit bedrock. Mara dropped to her knees with a mag light, beam slicing under the door's weather strip. There was no gap, no sliver of moonlight from the parking lot they had been standing in 30 seconds ago. Only blackness so total it looked wet. "Guys," Bishop said, voice flat through the comms, we just lost the satellite bounce. Uplinks showing 100% signal strength but zero throughput. Like the dish is screaming into a pillow. Luna's chest-rigged camera autofocused on her face as she forced the smile back into place for the viewers. 89,000 concurrent now, climbing. Okay, chat, minor technical hiccup. Doors are stickier than expected. Classic haunted house welcome, right? She hammered the crash bar again. Nothing. Outside, on the monitors they had left running in the lead van for backup recording, the parking lot was empty. No vans. No jeeps. Only their footprints leading up to the entrance, then abruptly stopping where the chains lay in a perfect circle, as if the vehicles had been erased between frames. Mara's Geiger counter began chattering, slow at first, then frantic. She stared at it, confused. Blackwood had no radioactive history. Vic pulled the hydraulic spreader from his pack, jaws whining as they bit into the door seam. The tool's gauge redlined at 20 tons and the needle snapped. A single drop of blood rolled from Vic's nostril, bright against his lip before he wiped it away. From somewhere high above, carried down the lightless stairwells and ventilation shafts, came the soft metallic rain of every interior door in the building closing in sequence. Floor by floor. Wing by wing. A slow, patient applause. Luna looked straight into her lens, pupils wide. Chat, if you can hear us, we might be staying longer than 24 hours. The viewer count froze at 666,666, then rolled forward again like nothing had happened. They had only climbed one flight of stairs, boots crunching on decades of plaster dust, when the PA system crackled awake. Not the polite hiss of modern speakers but the wet, magnetic drag of ancient vacuum tubes warming up inside walls that hadn't carried power since Eisenhower. Every fluorescent tube in the corridor flickered once, twice, then settled into a sickly amber glow that made their skin look jaundiced on camera. A child's voice poured out, tinny and warped by oxide degradation, yet impossibly clear. Luna, why did you let the dark in the closet watch you change clothes when you were 9? The words punched the air from her lungs. She froze on the landing, GoPro capturing the exact moment her face drained of blood. That memory belonged to no forum post, no drunk live-stream confession, no childhood friend. She had never spoken it aloud to anyone, not even the therapist she saw for 6 months after her mother found the drawings. Vic's head snapped toward the nearest ceiling speaker, mounted behind rusted wire mesh. What the fuck kind of prank? The voice cut him off, shifting pitch, now a little boy with a Carolina drawl. Victor still sleeps with the lights on because the shadow under the bed told him it would crawl inside his mouth if he screamed. Vic's hand flew to the scar that ran along his lower lip. Bike accident, he told everyone, actually the night he bit through his own mouth to keep from crying out when he was 7. Mara's Geiger counter went berserk, needle burying itself. She stared at Bishop, eyes wide, because the next recording wasn't a child anymore. It was her own voice, recorded at 14, whispering into a pink Sony recorder the night her father hanged himself in the garage. I should have opened the door faster. I heard the chair tip. I just stood there. Bishop alone said nothing. He simply reached up and pulled his headphones off, letting them dangle around his neck like a noose. The final tape rolled, and it was him, age 10, mid-confession at a church camp he'd never told a soul about. I let him drown because he called me a faggot. I held his head under just long enough to be sure. The PA fell silent. Somewhere far below, water dripped in perfect 4/4 time. Luna's stream chat scrolled so fast it blurred, viewers spamming question marks, clown emojis, then suddenly, in unison, a single phrase repeated thousands of times by accounts with their exact profile pictures. We were always listening. The amber lights dimmed until only the red tally lights on their cameras remained, pulsing like heartbeats in the dark. The ward they entered had once been pediatrics, though nothing about the peeling murals of smiling suns and balloons felt childlike anymore. A single shard of mirror, left over from a shattered nurse's station, hung crooked on the far wall, its silver backing flaking like dead skin. Mara crossed first, boots splashing through something thick that had seeped from the ceiling years ago and never quite dried. Her headlamp caught the mirror and threw her reflection back at the group, pale face, wide eyes, mouth open in mid-sentence about radiation spikes. She stopped talking. In the glass, her reflected self was still walking, 3 full seconds behind real time. The delay was wrong in a way that hurt to watch, like frames dropping inside a skull. Mara lifted her right hand to touch the mold-spotted wallpaper. The reflection lifted its hand a breath later, fingers brushing nothing but air. She forced a laugh that cracked halfway out. Latency issues, she muttered, tapping the side of her GoPro as if that explained it. Luna stepped beside her, curious, and the mirror split their images perfectly, 2 women side by side. Except Luna's reflection didn't turn when Luna did. It kept staring straight ahead, directly into Mara's delayed ghost, and then it smiled. Not Luna's practiced streamer smile. Something wetter, wider, the corners slicing too far up the cheeks, revealing teeth that didn't quite match the ones in Luna's mouth. Vic saw it too. He whispered Christ and backed up until his shoulders hit the opposite wall. The reflection Luna ignored him completely. Its eyes, black from edge to edge now, never left Mara. Slowly, luxuriously, it raised one hand and waved with just 2 fingers, the way a child waves at something only it can see through a car window. Mara's actual body hadn't moved in almost 10 seconds. Her breath fogged the inside of her balaclava in rapid, panicked bursts. When she finally spoke, her voice came out small. "It knows my name." The mirror cracked from top to bottom without sound, a single fracture running straight through both reflected faces. For one frozen instant the glass showed not 2 women but dozens, every version of Mara who had ever stood in this room, all bleeding from the eyes, all smiling the same borrowed smile. Bishop's camera autofocused on the fracture, red tally light pulsing faster, as if the lens itself had started panting. Somewhere behind the silver, something moved that had no business casting a reflection at all. Mara took one involuntary step forward, drawn by her own lagging image reaching out to meet her. Her fingertips were inches from the glass when the reflection finally caught up to real time and screamed with her mouth. They followed the smell downward, sweet copper and formaldehyde baked into the concrete for decades, until the stairwell spat them into the sub-basement corridor that every archived floor plan insisted did not exist. The sign above the double doors read Treatment Theater in faded institutional green. The doors were already propped open, as though the building had been expecting guests. Inside, the room was vast and perfectly circular, tiered like a medical amphitheater from the 1950s. Rows of chrome restraint chairs descended toward a central stage lit by a single surgical lamp that had no visible power source. The lamp swung gently, though the air was dead still. Every chair was occupied. 27 bodies sat bolt upright, heads lolling at identical angles. Fresh blood pooled beneath the wheels, still spreading, still warm. The corpses wore the exact clothing the crew had put on that morning, Luna's black hoodie with the silver streak dyed into the hood, Vic's tactical vest with the same torn afterimage patch, Mara's olive parka with the microfiche satchel slung across the chest, Bishop's headphones dangling like black vines around a neck that had been opened ear to ear. Their own faces stared back at them, eyes milky but mobile, tracking the living intruders with wet clicks. Each dead version wore a full streaming rig, GoPros, chest mounts, blinking red lights recording nothing and everything. Tiny rivulets of blood ran from the corners of their filmed-over eyes exactly where tears would fall. Luna's duplicate sat closest to the stage. Its mouth moved in perfect sync with Luna's involuntary gasp, but no sound emerged. The microphone on its rig had been replaced by a rusted ice pick buried to the hilt in the soft palate. When real Luna raised a trembling hand to her own unblemished mouth, the corpse raised the same hand, fingers dripping, and waved with the lazy delight of someone greeting an old friend across a crowded room. Vic gagged and stumbled sideways. His corpse turned its head 180 degrees with a soft wet pop to keep watching him. The movement was smooth, rehearsed, eager. Mara's legs gave out. She landed hard on the blood-slick floor, palms slipping in it. Her duplicate leaned forward against its restraints as far as the leather straps allowed, smiling the way Mara smiled when she thought no one was looking, small, secret, ashamed. The corpse's lips parted. A single word bubbled out in Mara's own voice, captured perfectly by the chest mic. Soon. Bishop alone did not look at the bodies. He stared instead at the surgical lamp swinging above the stage, its bulb flickering in a pattern that matched the tally lights on every camera in the room, including the one still strapped to their living chests. The lamp stopped swinging. For one heartbeat the theater went perfectly dark. When the light returned, every corpse was standing. Restraints hung empty and dripping. 27 dead versions of the crew formed a silent semicircle, cameras raised, red lights pulsing in hungry unison. The stream's latency counter had always hovered at a comfortable 4.2 seconds, the price of satellite uplink in the middle of nowhere. At 2:17 a.m. it spiked to 11, then 30, then simply stopped counting. Bishop noticed first. He noticed everything that involved numbers. He tapped his tablet, frowned, and flipped to the raw feed monitor clipped to his belt. The screen showed the treatment theater from 30 seconds in the future. There they were on the display, Luna screaming as something long and jointless unfolded from the surgical lamp above her, Vic on his knees, clawing at his eyes while blood poured from his ears in perfect arcs, Mara already limp, being dragged by her own ponytail toward the open mouth of a corpse that wore her face, Bishop himself standing apart, mouth open in a silent howl, headphones split and leaking black fluid that crawled like ants. Real-time Bishop looked up from the tablet. None of that had happened yet. The room was still, the corpses still standing in their silent half-circle, red lights blinking in patient rhythm. Luna saw his face and grabbed the tablet. The future feed rolled on. In it, she watched herself watch the tablet, a perfect recursive loop that made her stomach lurch. Then the future Luna on the screen looked straight into the lens, straight at present Luna, and mouthed 3 words that arrived a full heartbeat before real Luna spoke them aloud. It already knows. Chat exploded. Not with memes or spam this time, but with timestamps. Hundreds of thousands of messages, all identical. User_88K, she breaks her neck at 2 hours 41 minutes and 12 seconds. User_88K, Vic's eyes pop at 2 hours 44 minutes and 9 seconds. User_88K, Bishop never leaves the chair. The usernames were different, but the profile pictures were the same, a grainy still frame of the 4 of them standing in the lobby at 12:03 a.m., the exact moment the doors had sealed. Every single commenter was them, from some angle they hadn't filmed yet. Vic tried to end the stream. He smashed his phone against the floor, heel grinding glass and circuit board into glittering paste. The tablet kept broadcasting. The GoPros on their chests kept broadcasting. The dead versions in front of them raised their own cameras in perfect synchronization, lenses dilating like hungry pupils. Mara started laughing, high and brittle. She pointed at the future feed, where her corpse was already standing again, neck twisted 180 degrees but eyes bright and aware. "They're not predictions," she whispered. "They're reruns." The latency counter reset to midnight and began counting upward again, frame by perfect frame, as the first wet crack of cartilage echoed from somewhere very close by. They pried open the projector booth at the rear of the treatment theater with Vic's dying multitool, the blade snapping off in the lock like a rotten tooth. Inside, dust floated in the projector's beam like slow-motion ash. A single 16mm reel still sat threaded on the ancient bell and howl, leader tape flapping gently though no motor turned. The film itself looked wet, glistening under the surgical lamp's swing. Mara hit play before anyone could stop her. The screen, a mold-stained drop cloth that had once been bedsheets sewn together, lit up with black and white footage dated September 1954. Grainy titles in institutional typewriter font. Project Igate, Cycle 7. Subjects, 31, Voluntary Observers, 0. Lunar Occultation Alignment, Optimal. Patients in restraint chairs filled the same theater, but the chairs were empty of corpses then. A doctor in a porcelain plague mask leaned into frame, voice muffled by rubber and distance. "The lens is not a window," he intoned, "it is a womb. The entity gestates in the interval between transmission and reception. It requires living eyes on the far side to pull itself through. Once critical mass of observation is achieved, the barrier thins to a membrane." The camera panned across the patients. Every single one stared directly into the lens, pupils blown wide, smiling the same borrowed smile now worn by the fresh bodies at their feet. One woman began reciting tomorrow's newspaper headlines verbatim. A man clawed his own eyes out on cue, then kept blinking with the empty sockets as if still seeing. The doctor continued, clinical and calm. Previous cycles used closed-circuit monitors. Inadequate. The entity needs distance. It needs millions. It needs the world to watch willingly. The reel skipped. Suddenly the footage was in color, impossible for 1954, showing the same room hours later. Bodies slumped. Blood everywhere. But in the background, behind the carnage, the camera's viewfinder glowed red. Something vast and angular moved inside the lens itself, pressing outward, distorting the glass like a face against wet cloth. Final title card, handwritten in red grease pencil. Next optimal alignment, November 19, 2025. Required viewers, 1,000,000 plus simultaneous. Method, global live broadcast. The projector kept running. Empty leader slapped the gate with a rhythmic, heartbeat thud. On the moldy screen, the red recording light from 1954 pulsed in perfect synchronization with the tally lights on their own cameras. Luna's GoPro auto-zoomed on the final frame frozen there, the doctor removing his mask to reveal a face that hadn't been born yet, her face, older, eyes replaced by twin lenses reflecting an endless theater of screaming watchers. The reel caught fire without heat, burning backward from the core outward until only white ash drifted down like snow onto the corpses that had once been patients and would soon be them. Vic found him first, in the hydrotherapy wing where the tub still brimmed with black water that reflected nothing. Bishop sat cross-legged on the cracked tile, headphones off for the first time all night, palms upturned and bleeding in perfect parallel lines. A rusted scalpel from some long-dead nurse's kit lay beside him like a loyal dog. The cuts were already scabbed, already old, though the blood still dripped fresh. He was speaking. Not English. The syllables rolled backward out of his throat, guttural and wet, vowels stretched until they snapped like ligaments. Latin, but wrong, the kind of Latin that predated Rome and tasted of deep ocean trenches. Each phrase carved itself into the air, lingering as faint after-images that hurt to perceive directly. With every sentence, new lines appeared on his forearms, precise, geometric sigils that intersected at impossible angles, folding inward like optical illusions that bled. Luna tried to drag him up. His skin was furnace-hot. When she touched him, the sigils flared beneath the surface, glowing the same red as every recording light in the building. "Bishop, stop. Look at me." He did. His eyes had rolled fully white, pupils contracted to pinpricks that somehow still focused. His mouth kept moving, faster now, the backward Latin accelerating into a clicking drone that vibrated in their teeth. Between phrases he translated himself, voice calm, almost gentle. "The house is pregnant," he said in perfect English, then immediately reversed the sentence phonetically without pausing. "Gestation began the moment the first lens crossed the threshold. The walls are amniotic. The cameras are umbilical." Mara's flashlight beam caught the nearest sigil, a perfect representation of the lunar occultation overhead, moon eclipsed within moon, each circle lined with tiny staring eyes. As Bishop traced it deeper into his own flesh, the eclipse outside actually shifted, Regulus flickering out for a fraction of a second that every telescope on Earth would later confirm never happened. Vic tried to pull the scalpel away. The blade sliced his palm to the bone without resistance, as if it had been waiting for fresh material. Blood spattered across Bishop's chest rig and the GoPro there drank it greedily, auto-adjusting exposure to capture every crimson highlight. Bishop smiled then, the expression too wide, splitting the corners of his mouth where no human muscle allowed. His voice dropped to a lover's whisper, still alternating fluent Latin and English like a corrupted translation layer. "It isn't possession. Possession implies two. There is only the watching now. The building has been watching since 1954, storing every eye that ever looked away too soon. Tonight it gives birth through us." He lifted his arms. The sigils aligned into a single, writhing glyph that cast its own shadow, a shadow that crawled across the ceiling though the flashlight never moved. Somewhere far above, the blood moon completed its occultation. The temperature in the room plummeted 30 degrees in the space of one heartbeat. Bishop's final forward sentence was barely audible over the wet click of the scalpel resuming its work. "Thank you for bringing it an audience large enough to crawl out." The viewer counter had long since abandoned sanity. It rolled past 8 figures, then 9, then 10, 1 billion, 2 billion, 3, ticking upward in smooth, impossible increments that no streaming platform on Earth could sustain. The numbers glowed blood-red against every cracked monitor, every phone screen, every dying phone they had smashed and resmashed. The building itself seemed to breathe in time with the climb. Luna noticed the chat first. Scrolling too fast to read individually, the messages had coalesced into a single, endless ribbon of text. Every line was a plea, typed in the exact fonts and colors each crew member had customized for their own private Discord accounts years ago, accounts they had deleted after college, after breakups, after funerals. "Luna Moon Voss, stop streaming, please God, turn it off. Vic the Brick, they're inside my walls now. Mara reads too much, I can't close my eyes, it's still recording. Bishop, no, I held him under, I'm sorry. Thousands of variations, millions, all from usernames that had been dormant or wiped clean. Profile pictures were childhood photos none of them had ever uploaded, Luna at 9 hiding in that closet, Vic at 7 biting through his lip, Mara frozen outside the garage door, Bishop knee-deep in lake water with his hands on a smaller boy's head. Vic tried to scream at the nearest camera, voice shredded raw. "We're offline. We broke everything. How are you still? A new message appeared, time-stamped from an account named after image_official, their channel's original handle, abandoned after a copyright strike in 2022. After image_official, you never went offline. After image_official, you went inside. Mara dropped to her knees in the corridor, clawing at her temples as if she could dig the words out. Fresh messages poured in from accounts bearing her dead father's name, her high school stalker's name, every patient file she had ever read aloud on stream. They all said the same thing in different voices. Don't let it use my face. Bishop, what was left of him, laughed through the blood bubbling in his throat. The sigils on his arms pulsed brighter with every million viewers added. The counter hit 5 billion and kept accelerating, fueled by something that had nothing to do with servers or satellites anymore. Luna grabbed the nearest GoPro, the one still strapped to a corpse that wore her hoodie, and stared into its lens. Her reflection stared back, older, eyeless, smiling from a theater full of chairs that stretched into infinity. The chat unified into one voice, one message, repeated by 5 billion handles at once. Thank you for the door. Thank you for the eyes. Thank you for watching us watch you watch us. The red tally lights brightened until the darkness itself began to bleed light. Luna was the last one still trying to move. Vic sat against the wall in the electroshock suite, rocking, palms pressed over his ruined eyes while blood seeped between his fingers in steady pulses. Mara lay curled on her side in the hallway, whispering apologies to a father who had never answered, her neck already swollen at a wrong angle. Bishop, no longer entirely Bishop, knelt in the center of the sigils he had carved into the floor itself, arms spread, mouth open in a soundless hymn as the glyphs lifted off his skin and hovered like burning paper. Luna alone kept walking, dragging a fire axe she had found in a nurse's station, swinging it at every camera she saw. She shattered wall-mounted security lenses that hadn't worked since 1973, smashed the GoPros from the corpses, crushed her own chest rig until plastic and glass rained around her boots. Each impact felt good for half a second, righteous, until the red light simply reappeared somewhere else, in the pupils of the dead, in the cracked lenses of abandoned spectacles, in the black water of the hydrotherapy tubs that now reflected her from angles that should have been impossible. She reached the main broadcast room, once the staff lounge, now a nest of cables that had grown through the floor like veins. A dozen monitors glowed there, each showing a different feed of the sanitarium, but every screen displayed the same thing, the outside world watching. Phones, laptops, televisions in airports and hospitals and bedrooms across the planet, all tuned to Afterimage at 3:33 a.m. on November 19, 2025. She saw a child in Tokyo holding a tablet too close to his face, pupils dilating in perfect sync with the tally lights. She saw an old woman in Lagos fall to her knees in prayer while the screen in front of her bled static shaped like Bishop's sigils. She saw entire sports bars frozen mid-cheer, every eye reflecting the same red dot. The entity was no longer inside Blackwood. It had never been inside Blackwood. It had been waiting on the other side of every lens, patient as deep water, growing fat on stolen glances since the first patient stared into the first camera in 1954. The building was only the womb, the broadcast was the birth canal, the viewers, billions of them now, were the dilated cervix. Luna raised the axe one final time, aiming for the largest monitor showing Earth from orbit, the curve of the planet dotted with unblinking red points like infected cells. Before the blade fell, her own reflection in the black glass smiled without her and spoke with a voice made of every chat message ever typed. Thank you for opening us. The axe slipped from her numb fingers. Somewhere behind her eyes, a tiny red light flickered on, steady and hungry. Luna's hands shook so violently the axe head clattered against the floor like a broken bell. Every screen in the broadcast room had gone black except for the tally lights, those refused to die. She lunged for the nearest GoPro still clipped to what was left of Vic's vest, fingers scrabbling at the power button that had been soldered shut sometime in the last 10 minutes. The plastic was warm, pulsing. She smashed it against the wall. The lens cracked but the red diode glowed brighter, as if nourished by the violence. She moved faster then, a frantic hurricane through the corridors, swinging at anything that could record. She crushed Mara's body cam under her boot until the housing split and black fluid oozed out like infected blood. She drove the axe through Bishop's thermal drone, sparks showering her face. She tore the 16mm projector from its bolts and hurled it down the stairwell, real unspooling behind it like a screaming intestine. Each destruction felt like exhaling, like maybe one less doorway. But the lights kept reappearing. In the shards of mirror still clinging to the pediatric ward wall. In the dark water of the tubs. In the milky cataracts of the corpses that now stood in perfect rows, heads tilted, waiting for her to notice them again. Every time she blinked, the red dot was already there, waiting behind her eyelids. She reached the lobby at last, lungs raw, axe handle slick with sweat and someone else's blood. The front doors stood open for the first time all night. Outside, the parking lot was bathed in clean moonlight, vehicles exactly where they'd left them, dew on the windshields, no footprints leading away. Escape yawned 10 steps away. Luna dropped the axe. She clawed at her own face, then her chest rig, ripping Velcro and zippers until the last physical camera clattered to the terrazzo. She stood naked from the waist up, skin prickling in the sudden cold, palms open to show the night there was nothing left to film her with. Silence. Then the softest click, like a shutter inside bone. A pinpoint of red light ignited directly in the center of each of her pupils, steady, unblinking, perfectly round. It brightened until the reflection in the lobby's cracked glass doors showed her eyes as twin recording indicators. The light did not flicker with her pulse, it had its own rhythm, patient and vast. From somewhere far away came the sound of billions of speakers powering on at once. Luna opened her mouth. No scream emerged. Instead, her voice, calm, warm, the practiced cadence she used for sponsor reads, spoke directly to the darkness that now lived where her sight had been. "Chat, we're just getting started." Her irises dilated until no color remained, only that hungry, crimson glow. She smiled the smile that paid their rent, raised one hand in a lazy wave, and stepped backward into the sanitarium. The doors closed gently behind her, chains slithering across the floor, and relocked themselves without a sound. The feed died at 4:07 a.m. precisely. Every screen on Earth that had been locked to afterimage went black at once, phones dropping from numb fingers, televisions in Times Square billboards freezing mid-frame, hospital monitors flatlining into perfect silence. A single frame lingered in the afterimage, Luna standing alone in the lobby, eyes glowing solid red, mouth open in that final sponsoried smile. Then nothing. Static like fresh snow. For 9 seconds the world held its breath. At 4 hours 7 minutes and 9 seconds the stream returned. Same channel. Same title card. Same excited intro music layered under wind howling through pine trees. The counter reset to 0 and began climbing again, lazy and inevitable. Luna stepped into frame exactly as she had 4 hours earlier, silver streak in her hair catching the ring lights, pelican case swinging at her side. She flashed the practiced grin that had once felt like armor. "Chat, we are officially inside the blackout zone. No cell service, no emergency exit once we're in. If we go dark, well, that's why you're here, right?" Behind her, Vic laughed the same nervous laugh. Mara adjusted her satchel. Bishop gave the camera a thumbs up that left a faint red smear on the lens no one noticed yet. The viewer count exploded past 100,000 in the first 30 seconds. Tips rolled in like digital blood. They jimmied the chain doors. Rust flaked away like old scabs. The moment they crossed the threshold, the chains outside rattled once, then fell silent, as though something on the other side had gently set them down. But this time the viewers saw what the crew could not. In every dark corner of the shot, in every reflection in every broken window, in the black water of every distant hydrotherapy tub, pale faces pressed against the inside of the glass. Billions of them. The audience that had watched the first cycle now stood inside the frame, screaming without sound, hands clawing at the barrier from the wrong side. Their mouths formed perfect circles of warning no one on the new feed would ever hear. Luna waved at the lens one more time, pupils already beginning to bleed crimson at the edges. Tonight's going to be legendary. The red tally lights brightened until the darkness itself began to burn, and the loop, perfect, hungry, eternal, began again.